All right. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Oregon Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Thursday, November 15th. This is Elin Miller, Chair of the Board. This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to begin by asking Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Carla Valness to review a few housekeeping items for us this morning.
Good morning. Just a reminder to please mute your phones or computer audio during the call. If you are joining the call by video conference, we request only board members and presenters to turn on your camera during the call. And if you would like to see any pre-meeting materials, they are posted on our ODA website at oda.direct/board-agriculture, or items will be posted after the meeting. And just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Carla. Carla, would you please call on the roll for introductions, and I'll begin. Elin Miller, Farmer Umpqua.
Chad Allen is excused. Barbara Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, Chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Brian Harper.
Brian Harper, Farmer, Junction City.
Shante Johnson is excused. Miguel Lopez.
Miguel Lopez, public farmer, public member. Wayne, grape grower, Willamette Valley. Sorry, brain's not on yet.
Eric Orm.
Eric Orm, farmer, Heppner.
Luisa Santa Maria.
Luisa Santa Maria, public member.
Randy Savati. I believe she's excused. Josh Zielinski.
Josh Zielinski, nurseryman, Salem, Oregon.
Dean Simonich.
Stacy Simonich, Dean of Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Sciences and Director of the Oregon Experiment Station. I'm not sure the room camera's on. I don't see you guys this morning.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. My only concern is if we turn the room camera on, let's not lose audio. So thank you, though, Dean.
And Acting Director Bill Ryan is joining late this morning. We'll do a quick round the room. Start with Jonathan.
Jonathan Sandon, Assistant Director of Oregon Department of Ag.
Ed Fine, agronomist, president of Lane Families for Farms and Forests. Warren Henderson, Deputy Director of the Department of Ag.
Bill Miller, farmer, Umpqua.
Chris Bellman, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Director of Oregon Farm and Ag Network.
As a Stapleton, Department of Agriculture.
Stacey Detweiler, Ron Samuelson.
Jim Johnson, Land Use and Water Plan Coordinator, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
And I would just like to remind anyone joining us online, if you would like to put your name in the chat box, that would be helpful. Thank you. I think we're ready to go.
All right. Thank you, Carla. And note that the public comment period for today is 10:15 a.m. If you'd like to sign up this morning to provide verbal comments in person, please use the sign-up sheet at the entrance of the table. If you are joining the meeting online, please request using the chat box, including your name and organization. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. This meeting is being recorded, so please note that. And guests, please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. All right, first on the agenda, we're very happy to have Dean Simonich. And I don't know, Dean, you can't see the camera, but some of us are wearing bright orange today. We're going to be wearing orange for the next 3 days and no purple allowed up through Saturday night. So anyway, Dean Simonich, I'll turn it over to you for remarks. Thank you.
Great. And I don't have my orange on today, but I'll fix that. But thank you so much for your support. Nice to talk with all of you today. Stacy Simonich, Dean of OSU's College of Agricultural Sciences and Director of the Oregon Experiment Station. Want to just take a few minutes here today to give you a brief update on where the college is at, and start first with our student enrollment. for this fall. Our student enrollment is up about 1%. And that's been trending about usually about 2%. We're down to about 1%. But in part, we think that's due to during COVID, of course, enrollment really dropped at our Oregon's community colleges, and we receive a lot of transfer students. So that drop likely could be that COVID effects playing out in terms of student enrollment in community colleges and transfers being down. But I will say overall, our college continues to grow in student enrollment, which is quite different than many of our peers across the US, other land grants, colleges of agricultural sciences, and in part because we have a very strong eCampus online program and degrees at OSU, not only within the college, but OSU in general. And about 40% of our students now are taking some form of online within our college. So we're really serving students wherever they might be in Oregon. If you don't have the funds to come to Corvallis, the luxury to come to Corvallis and pay high rents, you can stay back at your ranch or back at your farm in Eastern Oregon and other places and still get an OSU, a strong OSU degree. So that's really a big bonus, not only to the campus, but to our students in our state, as well as students across the country and world. So we're doing well in terms of student enrollment. Research-wise, we're really doing well. We've doubled our research grants in the last 3 years. We're now at $114 million in research grants for FY23. Happen to be the largest college, largest funding, research funding of any other college at OSU, including College of Engineering and Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. So last fall, universities.com ranked our college #2 in the US in terms of, for students, in terms of recruitment, retention, and graduation and going out and getting good jobs. So we're doing well. And of course, I'm not mentioning extension specifically because extension is under Ivory Lyles, the vice provost and director for extension. But my main focus within the college and what I oversee is primarily research and academics. So things are going well there. In terms of state legislative funding, we really are grateful for the support we received from all of our stakeholders, partners, and the legislature this past session. And so for the agricultural experiment station, which is the research part of the college, not the extension part, but the research part of the college, we received an increase of about $13.6 million increase over the biennium. That was close to 17% increase, which is very welcome because we hadn't received continuing service level in quite a number of years. So we were having to kind of scavenge positions to pay salaries, et cetera. So the continuing service level was about 6.4 million per biennium. Resilient food systems, in addition to continuing service levels, was 5.4 million per biennium. And then an agriculture water management technical assistance program, a legislative earmark of 1.8 million per biennium. So we're working through our priority staffing process, and I've to date have given the thumbs up to go ahead and hire about 31 positions across the state. Some of those are refilling positions, some of those are new positions for research. Again, this isn't extension, this is research. Ivory Lyles oversees extension. And so when I look across these positions, quite a few of them will be out in the state. Something like 13, 14 will be based at our experiment stations across the state. So that's going well. As always, if you follow me on social media, I'm always out and about showing what we're up to. I'm having some turnover in terms of retirements, and so we have a national searches out for a horticulture department head. We'll be starting a national search for a new crop and soil sciences department head, a national search for our director at our Madras station. We hired a former College of Ag Sciences graduate to be the director of our Food Innovation Center in Portland, Marcia Walker. We did a national search hiring a new person, Brian Pearson, for our station in Hood River, hired from Arizona State University, James Silikowski, who's the director of our stations in both Newport and Astoria, and then Oregon Wine Research Institute Director James Osborne. So fortunate to be in a position of doing lots of hiring. And then I'll just add renewed focus on collaboration with other OSU colleges, meeting regularly with the Dean of College of Engineering, College of Business, and College of Forestry, both on the research side and the academic side. So that's my brief update this morning.
Thank you, Dean Simonich. Any questions or comments from the directors? Director Boyer.
Good morning, Dean Simonich, Barbara Boyer. So you had briefly touched upon the Ag Water Quality Assistance. Can you elaborate a little bit on that position, please?
Yeah, actually, I'm forgetting the House bill number, but it was a specific House bill. I don't want to say a number because I don't have it right here, but it's the Agriculture Water Management Technical Assistance Program funding. And so it is to help facilitate struggles with drought and to look at novel ways of irrigation, water conservation. So there'll be one assistant professor in biological and ecological engineering in Corvallis. There'll be another assistant professor in ag water management at our in Madras at our Central Oregon Agricultural Research and Extension Center, and then up to 6 support staff positions to collect data and across the state. And this group coming together, 8 people in total, to help strategize and help stakeholders and partners across the state better manage better ag water management. So, and those other 6 positions will be located at various experiment stations in the state.
That's exciting. Thank you.
Great. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, Dean Simonich, thank you very much, and we may see you Saturday. So, good. All right. Next on the agenda is we had brought up yesterday that we had one application for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission. And what I'd like to do now is we had some comments in support of that individual nominated. I'd like to have further discussion to see if there were any other thoughts board members might have, and then I'd entertain a motion to accept, if the directors so choose, this nominee.
I'll make a motion.
All right, Director Boyer.
I move, unless anybody has any questions or comments. All right, I move that we accept, I know him as Jim Bob, but what's his formal name on here? James Robert Collins as the farmer rancher position that we will bring forward to. We are recommending this person for the OWEB board to approve Jim Bob Collins.
Is there a second?
Eric Orm, second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? See if Dean Simonich, and no one online either. Okay. All those in favor of moving forward the nomination for James Robert Collins to the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission for commission's approval signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Excellent. Super. Because of just timing of the meeting too, we'd like to ask Director Boyer to give her OWEB update at this time, and we're running ahead of schedule, so I think that will work. So.
All right, thank you. We had our Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board meeting in beautiful Klamath Falls, Monday, October 23rd toward the 25th. And we got to tour the J.C. Boyle Dam before its removal. This particular OWEB board has committed $15 million to restoration projects on the Oregon side of this project. It's the largest dam removal project in the world. So it's really fascinating to see it ahead of time. And then the whole board that committed to this this contingency money, it's not contingency, we committed to it, that we committed to come back together in 2 years to actually see the project. So we're putting that in the budget because not all the board members today will be there in 2 years. So excited to be a part of that project. We also approved, or we're in discussion, and most likely we'll approve at our next board meeting. We are now incorporating DEI into all of our grant proposals, and it's not going to be required, but we want the grantees to start thinking in that arena when they're filling out their proposals. We also got an update on the ODF&W Beaver Action Plan, and we committed some funds from the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund towards this action plan, so stay tuned on that. We also got an update from ODF that we only had 900 fires this fire season for a total of 18,000 acres, which was way down. So that was somewhat good news. And then in closing from our board meeting, we had a grant offering that we had to approve and deliberate on, and we granted $12.4 million in conservation projects. So yeah, I always like that when we're like, that's how you spend $12.4 million. Close the book. So, but they were great proposals, and it's a lot of work. Our board packets are 600 pages. So when we have grant offerings. So I love being part of the board, and I like being your representative on the OWEB board. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Boyer. Any questions, comments? I think one thing, since we do have, I think one of our resolutions is talking about coordination with OWEB. So would you be willing to just have OWEB take a look at our resolution and see if there's any things they'd like to add to as we deliberate on that?
In talking with acting or Deputy Director Henderson, we agreed to bring it to the Deputy Director of OWEB, Stephanie Page, and have her review it with the OWEB lens and see if there's any additions or comments on it. So we will be doing that before our next meeting.
Excellent. Great. Super. Okay. All right. Moving on, we'd like to ask Ed Fine of Lane County, Lane Families for Farms and Forests to please come forward for a presentation. Thank you. And if you do some self-introduction, because I didn't have too much background on you, so thank you.
So I'm Ed Fine, president of Land Families for Farms and Forests. I'm working agronomist, mostly in Lane County. My office is in Lane County, and I work with some farms in Lynn County, Benton County, and a little bit down in Douglas County. I tend to go where the business takes me. I pretty much grew up in Lane County, but I've lived in other places in Oregon, but had the opportunity to come back with my career as an agronomist. I was born in Eastern Oregon, and I got started with Lane Families for Farms and Forests with the founding president, Marie Bowers. I knew she was much more involved in grassroots efforts than I was, and there was some issues that were coming up on ballot measures that I was pretty passionate about, and asked what I could do to help. And I just kept showing up, and now I'm the president. So I'm just going to go ahead and read our mission statement as Lane Families for Farms and Forests to introduce the group. As we're a group of community members concerned with conserving agriculture and forestry in Lane County, Oregon. Through Lane Families for Farms and Forests, we are working towards preserving the thriving agriculture and forestry industries in Lane County for generations to come. And what that really means for us is there's a lot of forestry in Lane County. There's a lot of agriculture in Lane County, but foresters like to stay out in the woods and farmers like to stay out on the farm. Don't really cross paths with each other that often, but a lot of the issues that we deal with as responsible land managers are the same issues. And the people who are pushing back on responsible land management through mostly in Lane County ballot measures are the same people that affect us both. And we thought that it didn't really make sense for us to advocate for each of us separately. And so that's how we came together as Lane Families for Farms and Forests. And a big part of it is bringing foresters and farmers together so that we know we can lean on each other when issues come up that we need to work on together, and to consolidate our education and outreach efforts with local stakeholders, politicians, conservation groups, whatever it may need be, to have one party instead of two parties. So I would say that some of our most effective education and outreach events have been our social events, where we we call it the Feast on the Farm, where we have a nice heavy appetizer catered dinner with plenty of drinks, and invite as many local stakeholders as we can. So whether that's farmers, foresters, timberland owners, local elected officials, local government employees who are often, they may not be making the decisions, but they're implementing things that affect us. And so as many people as we can get together so that there is, you're putting a face on farming and forestry for everyone, local elected officials, county commissioners, instead of, when you think forestry, you think, oh, I know Jerry. You don't think of the log trucks. And when you're talking about farming, it's like, oh, I know Brian. I'm not thinking about a big sprayer driving through a field. And those social events where you get to know people, we've all gotten to know people on a personal level. I'm lucky enough that most of the county commissioners and state reps in Lane County recognize me, just because I've been around for all these events for many years. And if I have a concern or I need to talk to them about something, it's an open line. It is for everyone in Oregon in reality, but that has been a big benefit, I think, for the farmers I work with. And our most recent event that we did was a watershed quality focused tour. And I'd say those are our more education heavy events that we put on. We try and do a tour and a feast every year. Last couple of years have been hard, but the most recent tour we did was watershed quality and water quality focused, and showing that the farmers in Lane County and the foresters in Lane County are responsible landowners, and we care about water quality, and we're the ones who affect water quality. We, farmers and foresters, make the water quality better. Water quality is worse where there's not farms and forests. And so that was our focus for the tour. We spent a good portion of the tour focused on the recovery efforts and water quality strategies after the holiday farm fire. So that was, a big water quality impacting event in forests, where there was not, you can't say that that was because of irresponsible forest management, or it was just a freak of nature forest fire that really didn't really matter if the trees were thinned, or if it was a high density planting, or it was, pseudo or even actual old growth unharvested forest. It all burned. When you have 70-mile-per-hour winds at a crown fire, there's no coming back from it. The only way you can deal with it is after the fact. And so we were on I believe a 5,000-acre tract of private timber ground, and showing all of the work that they've done after the fire, to replant trees and do everything they can to ensure better water quality going forward and appropriate reforestation, and kind of comparing that to neighboring ground that is managed by federal agencies who don't necessarily have the wherewithal to pull the trigger on something as quickly and start planting trees the next day, or the funding to do so. And you could see that the privately managed timber ground and the publicly managed timber ground, it was a visual difference in getting it back into a productive forest. And a productive forest has better water quality than what used to be forest and is now noxious weeds. That's what unmanaged ground turns into after a forest fire, at least in the McKenzie watershed. And we moved on to one of our board members' properties. A lot of members of our group are small woodland owners, so folks who manage their timber properties, live on their timber properties, as their home and as an income source. And the challenges that a very small woodland owner deals with after a catastrophic wildfire, you're homeless, your retirement investment, it burned. Harvesting those trees over the next 30 years was a big portion of their retirement income. And how does someone who they don't have employees, they don't have equipment, going to reforest? And the way they did it is their neighbors, who are, some of their neighbors are large family-owned forests. Some of their neighbors are forests owned by private equity. Some of their neighbors are internationally owned private forests. And all of their neighbors helped all of the small woodland owners in some way. So whether that way was you have a private forester that's employed by your neighbor who just stops by to say hello and is like, oh, this is going to work better on your property, an expert. And all that was just being a good neighbor. Or, if they're planting 5,000 acres of trees, they're going to have a couple of extra trees after they do that, a couple of extra seedlings. And so a lot of the small woodland owners, purchased a certain number of tree seedlings, and the soils after the Holiday Farm fire were devastated. They didn't wash downstream, they burned. So all the topsoil in the Holiday Farm fire is pretty much gone, where the fire was the hottest. And so that makes it really, really hard to replant trees. And so we talked about, the replanting issues folks were having. And we finished our tour on, it's not the oldest filbert orchard in the country. I would say that it is the oldest economically viable filbert orchard in the country. So there's older filbert orchards that are not really, they're more of, a heritage piece, and some of them are on public, some of the very old ones are in park ground. So they're managed for a park setting instead of for an economic yield. But this is 110-year-old filbert trees that pay their rent. And so you talk about watershed quality, and this is a closed canopy piece of farm ground. A raindrop doesn't hit that soil before it gets slowed down by a filbert tree. So, and there's ground cover out there, and that farm in particular works really closely. There are along the McKenzie River, works really closely with. I'm going to use the wrong term for this. Their local watershed council, and there's another conservation group they work with to manage the riparian areas that they own, to ensure that their farming practices keep the McKenzie, keep it clean. They are upstream of the Eugene drinking water intake. So EWEB, the Eugene Water and Electric Board, which manages that drinking water intake for the city of Eugene, is also a partner on that farm, and that's a completely voluntary partnership between a public utility and the farmers and landowners up there, and they get together to decide, these are our current farm practices, and we know we can do more. You can always do more for watershed quality, but we farm for a living, so we need to make sure that we can keep farming for a living. And being a publicly funded utility, they can leverage that for grants and funding to do more extreme I guess, agricultural practices that probably don't make sense from an economic standpoint, but they do make sense from a water quality standpoint. And so if you can bring those two groups together to say, well, if you help me, I'll help you on a completely voluntary basis, then they've done quite a few integrated pest management practices that are much more expensive than the traditional practices, and a much more precise soil health and plant nutrition program than is traditional. And the public-private partnership there on that farm has been very successful in ensuring that the water that comes off of their farm is cleaner when it leaves than when it gets there. And that kind of mentality and that kind of thinking is really where Lane Families and Forests sits. Is we want to help our members advocate for their goals and their desires on their farm properties and forest properties, the lands they manage, and bring them together with each other to advocate, but also to bring them together with any local stakeholders who can be helpful. And so some local stakeholders, sadly, are not helpful for private land managers. They like to be around private lands. They like open farm ground. They like to see, all of our beautiful private forests in Oregon. But the disconnect between the land and the people is where Lane Families really shines, is bringing people together. And that's why a lot of our focus is on the social events. To bring people together has allowed us to, I would say, show the county commission, who on a lot of these county level ballot measures is the level of government we're dealing with, that they need to think of us, not just, a lot of cases, not just the people who elected them into office, because, while Lane County is a global player in the forestry industry and a statewide player in agriculture, there's not that many of us. If every person who worked in natural resources in Lane County was a unified voting block, we still wouldn't make a dent in urban Eugene, basically. The voting block of urban Eugene kind of controls the county politics. And so we, not necessarily to change, we're a nonpartisan group, but not necessarily to change the partisan makeup of the county, but to make sure that anybody who is elected in Lane County knows that the farmers and foresters here care about Lane counties. Some of us have been here since, or some of the families that are members of Lane Families for Farms and Forests have been here since before it was Oregon, before it was a state. So that longevity and multi-generational families caring about Lane County speaks deeply and has allowed us to really advocate more effectively with our local elected officials and as a group, when they come to one of our events, to see that, oh wow, I didn't realize there were this many people who cared this passionately about agriculture and forestry in Lane County, because they don't hear that from their voters. Their voters are often very, very far on the other side of the fence as far as advocating for responsible land management from private landowners. I know I had something else I needed to touch base on.
Well, what we could do is actually, it's been very informative. We could open it to questions, and then
I would love
maybe
some
we could
questions.
weave into maybe what you hadn't told us yet. So I'll open it to the group. I do have one to start with, but open it to the group. What do you feel, because I just am intrigued by the forestry and agriculture coming together, certainly on a statewide basis, not necessarily national, we have any of that going on. But what have been the biggest ahas for your members? And maybe because this is the Board of Agriculture, from a farmer perspective of the ahas as you're bringing the community together, certainly, but also foresters and farmers together?
That is a really good question. I guess one of the things that wasn't an aha for me, but it's been an aha for a lot of the farmers and foresters that are involved is, there's stereotypes about farmers and there's stereotypes about loggers. But when you bring people in forestry and farmers together, it is incredibly how similar these two groups of people who never cross paths, how similar they are. The way you earn a living out on the land, and how much people appreciate being out on the land. And it's for the farmers and foresters I work with, the fact that we think of ourselves as completely separate industries, but we're really not. And the amount of friendships that have formed across farmers and foresters has been a big benefit for our members. And I'd say that there's even quite a few business connections that have been made, is like farmers have certain resources that foresters don't. Foresters have certain resources that farmers generally don't possess. And there's been a decent amount of folks who've been like, oh, my buddy from Land Families for Farms and Forests, I wonder if he can help me with this. And often the answer is yes. But the ahas of, I think that's the biggest one for me, is the similarities and social connections that have been made. These are people I can rely on.
Great, thank you. Director Boyer?
Thanks a lot for coming forward today and educating us. I did not know this organization existed, so I appreciate it. So I'm curious, do you have a board?
Yes, yeah, we do have a board. I wish I knew all the members off the top of my head. Brian's on the board. And then we have quite a few board members who are small woodland owners. So yeah, we are a registered nonprofit. I also can't remember which kind of nonprofit, but so we do have a board of directors, bylaws, the whole thing. So.
And are you monthly meetings?
Monthly meetings. Yeah, if anybody wants to join, it's tonight.
And I'm curious, when was it formed?
2016?
Oh, okay.
That sounds about right.
The first meeting was right before I got on board back.
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and I believe I missed the first couple of meetings. It was in the very early days, and then I got involved. So yeah, the ballot measure that got me involved was an attempt to increase regulation of genetically modified crops. thought that was a bad idea. And so I got involved and that ballot measure failed.
All right, thank you.
Good. Director Zelinski.
Thanks. I just had one question. Are you aware of any other counties that have a similar group?
I know there is a similar group in Tillamook County, and there is a similar group in Lincoln County. We're all organized a bit differently as far as our mission and what we do, but I would love to see one in every county that did this, and then hopefully we could get together on a whole state level. But grassroots organizing is takes a special person to find the joy in it.
Right. Especially when you're trying to get people out of their fields and farms.
Yeah, get people out of the woods, get people out of off the farm.
Bring
It's
them around other people. It's kind of.
yeah. That of all the difficult things I've had to do, that's the hardest as president of a grassroots nonprofit. So
I think it's really neat how you basically broaden who's involved, because that's going to also kind of broaden this. Like, everybody has really specific needs, but I think when you get a little bit bigger group, it's like what really matters. So
yes, and
that's kind of cool. I think every county should have that too.
Thank you.
Right.
So I was just gonna,
Director Harper.
yeah, thank you. Brian Harper. It's challenging, as Ed is describing with grassroots, because we tend to be, like Josh was saying, we just stay on the farm or stay on the forest. Ed mentioned that. But to make the, I guess, motivation more proactive rather than reactive is a serious challenge. When we first started, those steering committees had been, I think, winter of 16. We were at Shadow Hills Country Club, and you can make it one huge giant room by opening a divider, or you can just make it small. And I figured it was just going to be a few people. And there was like 100 people there. And every major, Douglas County, Lane County, we had representatives from Douglas County, because they felt the threat of it moving. Fortunately, we had preemption. I mean, with like aerial application ban, that sort of thing, which if you had a backpack sprayer, it would have included that, above 3 feet. So it really, I mean, people were just tired of being threatened. And, us private landowners, from the 60-some thousand acre to 100-some thousand acre family-owned operations in forestry to several thousand acre farmers in Lane County, got together, and people you would never expect to show up because you just never see them at stuff, because they tend to be busy, or it's the only, like Josh says, they focus on what groups specifically benefit them, their operation, showed up to, give their 2 cents. And I think after a few meetings, we all kind of knew who should probably be on the board, and with a good balance of representation, we couldn't find places to meet because we had so many people at our board meetings once we just, assembled everything. I mean, it was very much a rewarding experience, up front. Once you tend to accomplish your goal, that's when people start fading away. And but we've been able to maintain it. COVID didn't help, but we are getting folks kind of motivated again. Once we kind of broke the ice again with our last tour, I think it was, you always find people impressed or surprised or better educated after they leave. But I mean, it really is a cool group, and you do find out how similar we actually are. Yeah, every county needs a group like what Tillamook and Lincoln and Lane County have done. It's pretty cool, and you meet people you would have never, crossed paths with, like Ed said. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for all the effort we put into being proactive and making sure that we're engaging and educating local elected officials and stakeholders, we get so much more engagement when there's issues that arise.
Sure.
So, and it's the time to engage with the county level issues, ballot measures mostly, is really before they're even a ballot measure, and hopefully before they become an official ballot measure, when they're a proposed ballot measure gathering signatures. But you know, we're not in the business of publicizing all the ballot measures that come up, and so they only become really in the local lexicon once it's a very late stage in the campaign for increased regulation of what we do as private land managers. And then when that happens, we get lots and lots of engagement when those issues are kind of at the point where they're very difficult to educate around or to reach out to people and get away from these things. We get tons and tons of engagement because we're the local group that is on top of the issues all the time. So yeah, that is definitely true, Brian. It's I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but there's new ballot measures in the works right now, and so we've seen our engagement go up a little bit. So, like, I like the extra engagement. I don't like to have to push back every 18 months against new ballot measures, but.
Well, kudos to you. And yes, I think to the extent that we can encourage bringing forestry and agriculture together and look at common ground and also look at different alternatives you were talking about from a water quality health focus and soil health and all other things too. That's really, really positive. I hearken back to 1989 and 90 in California, where there was a huge ballot measure that folks said could never be killed. And it was going to really change the face of forestry and agriculture in the state of California. And it was polling 17-1 in favor, and we beat it 2-1, bringing everybody together. So it's amazing the power of folks when we can find common ground to deal with some challenging issues. So very cool.
Yep. Yeah, and there is always unexpected partners out there. So whether it's a farmer and a forester getting together, or a farmer and a public utility, or a farmer and a conservation group, or a forester and a conservation group, so you wouldn't necessarily expect those to be mutually beneficial relationships in all cases. But you know, if everybody comes to the table and is clear and cordial with what they need from each other, those kinds of things have worked out very well for a lot of land families for farms and forest members. So it's sometimes the world looks bleak, but if you broaden your horizons, there's a bright spot out there.
Great. Well, Ed, thank you for joining us, and thank you for setting an example. Really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. We are a little bit ahead of time, and so we're going to, let me just double check here that I'm not making a mistake in the timing. So yeah, so we are a little ahead of time for our break. We're going to take our break from 10 to 10:15 originally, and then open for public comment at 10:15. But what I'd like to ask the board to do, we may take the break early, but if you guys would take a look at during the business, our business section, we're going to be talking about setting dates for 2024 for our board meetings and also setting locations. And what I wanted us to kind of, during the break or whatever, for you guys to think about is availability, one, for sure. And Barbara, since you've got to leave for your other meeting, I've got your dates from availability. But I think secondly, too, in light of the fact that we have resolutions that we're going to be focusing on for 2024, we might think about location. Now, certainly location too of where we haven't been is really important. But if we can couple the haven't been with some of the other issues that we're going to be dealing with, that we can encourage the community to come. I mean, we've had the 8:15 coffee thing with us, and we've had more people come in some locations versus other locations. So again, I think if we can kind of point to being able to draw in a variety of the stakeholders for these meetings that are interested in what's happening with the Board of Ag, that would be great. So I will have us adjourn for for break until maybe just 5 after, and we'll reconvene and maybe we could have a little discussion and then we'll have time later too. And then we'll open for public comment at 10:15 as planned. So we'll reconvene at 5 after 10. Thank you. Pardon? Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so in your board packet, there are some suggested range dates, 3 dates for like a spring meeting, 3 day or winter meeting, 3 dates for a spring meeting, 3 dates for a late summer meeting, and 3 dates for a late fall meeting. So take a look at those dates. We're not absolutely wedded to those, but those were ones that Carla came up with. That were possible. I know I've got some conflicts and others have some conflicts, but to the extent we can find commonality, and then once we get those dates set, then my thought would be, do we go ahead and maybe designate some potential locations for that? And I think we are trying to be mindful too of Director Hansen, and I think we've asked some questions about making sure that they're not in conflict with anything that she may potentially need to be attending. So, okay, so let's go ahead and break till 5 after 10. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. So, and again, we're a little ahead of schedule for our public comment. Yeah. But what I wanted to go ahead and have us do some of the board business later. We can just take a couple minutes and maybe not even start planning on working on dates or locations, because that could take us a little bit of time to get through all that. But at the same time, one of the things I did want to have us think about as a board is the fact that, you know, we all as board members have responsibilities. And I think one of our biggest responsibilities as board members is showing up. Because we represent different parts and different perspectives, different geographies of the state, as well as different ideas. And so I wanted us to kind of talk through to make sure, because we don't have, it's really interesting. Every other board I serve on actually has a board member responsibility thing that you sign actually annually to say these are the expectations, to make sure that you're well informed when you come, you reach out to your constituencies, you know, that kind of stuff. So from a legal standpoint, I've talked to Deputy Director Henderson about it, and he asked me to forward him, you know, any templates I have from other organizations. Most of them are 501c3s, but I think I even have some from when I was in some government appointments before. Again, just to kind of talk through that, because I think it's important that we do. But I wanted to bring that up to the board, just to see if you had any comments, if you thought that was a good idea, a bad idea, what the expectations, and it's mainly really being present and making sure we're being able to do what we need to do as far as our job is concerned, serving the state and serving the governor. So I just open it up to any comments, discussions, you think that direction makes sense, that sort of thing. So
I guess being kind of a senior member here at this point, I think that's pretty important. I believe I've only missed one meeting, and that was because of harvest. But I mean, when I was first brought on, it was with Katie Koba. I didn't get to serve with her, unfortunately, but she definitely brought up the whole attendance thing, and she made it very serious. You know, there's nothing that we sign, but our role is important to the department and the governor's office, and like you say, our perspectives are all very unique and very special, and that's been my favorite part of being at these meetings, is learning from everybody. Because I mean, you just don't learn it all. Despite 130 years of our family in agriculture, boy, we have a lot to learn still, and it's pretty cool to work alongside folks that I probably wouldn't. I don't know if I would have ever met Eric over on the east side, you know, Louisa, any one of you. But I think it's what we do is important, and I think I don't think you're out of line by suggesting something like that, just to help solidify, I think, the seriousness of our role, despite it really being kind of volunteer. I mean, you're not paid, we're not employees, but.
oh, don't you get a big check every? No.
Negative.
Thank you, Director Harper. Really appreciate it. Anybody else, comment-wise, is that the direction we want to think about heading?
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of boards are in our current state. The virtual thing is both a blessing and a curse. Like, if it's available and you got some things going on, it's a good option, but it's also probably made the whole attendance thing really kind of relaxed. You know, not just here. I mean, probably is happening in different trade associate all throughout anywhere where people are essentially volunteering to be on a board. But I'd like to think that as we come out of that, even still, that excuse is kind of going away. I feel it personally. Like it's time to make sure I'm there. Kind of pretend that doesn't exist in a way.
Well, and from my standpoint, the showing up, because there are circumstances where virtual, you need to be virtual, but you show up virtually. And I think that's an important thing. And I think that's the blessing part of it. But at the same time, if we want to deliberate on virtual versus not virtual, I wasn't going there. I was going more just to make sure either you're here virtually or you're here in person, but in person is. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe that's something we need to think about too. Director Lopez?
Thank you, Chair Miller. I agree with the other directors on this one. It's something that when I was presented with this opportunity to apply, I took it seriously enough to be, well, what's this going to do? And what other sectors of ag am I going to discover along the way? And by doing these regionally and going and attending and going on these tours of all these facilities and these other farmers and what they're going through, and realizing that we're not dissimilar at all, but learning more about their particular ag sector has been the most intriguing part and helpful part for me. So being able to take a step back out of my own world to look at another fellow farmer's world and see that we are not dissimilar at all has been very important. So I think, attendance, some form that holds us accountable ourselves to what we're here for, but also we are going to miss some of these sometimes. Harvest for everybody. I'm just writing my notes down here for the dates for next year. I'm writing down harvest cycle for some of these, just so I can speak smartly and say, hey, I want to take everybody's time into consideration because it is important. Going over to the east side last year was amazing. We got to see a lot of things that we hadn't seen in a long time. Being in, the only one I've missed, I will admit, was the Southern Oregon. I apologize for not showing up to your part of the world. But that's, I think, a big driver for us being on this board is to go see our fellow ag sectors and learn more about what they're going through and create a better, smarter set of resolutions going forward out of that and in the long run. So I look forward to seeing something like this come up.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, everybody. And if there's other comments, please, zip those off to me or to Deputy Henderson. But it's something we'll look at and proceed with as we go. Now we are at the public comment period time. And we have one individual signed up for public comment. And it's Arnie Campfor. I'll have Arnie come forward. He's with Friends of Gap Road and would like to speak to us. And we have 3 minutes. So, all right. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And my name again is Arnie Camphor. I live at 23511 Gap Road, Harrisburg, Oregon. And our community out there has formed a little group called Friends of Gap Road, and we are in complete opposition to the Muddy Creek Solar Park that's been proposed in our area. It's a 1,588 acre. We refer to it as a industrial energy complex, experimental, and the fallacy of the entire thing to most everybody in the community is this is zoned exclusive farm use, high value farm ground, and that's a very large chunk of ground that we're threatened to lose in our area. The Linn County Commissioners are in support of opposing it, along with most everybody in the community out there. And according to state rules and regulations, they're allowed to submit this proposal by bystepping or sidestepping, you may say, the county commissioners and county approval or disapproval and go directly to the state for approval. And this is what they've chosen to do. The entities involved are a South Korean outfit and an outfit from California. And the bottom line, in the opinion of most everyone out there, is the threat of if this is allowed and they are able to put one of these complexes in, it's only the tip of the iceberg. And it will progress and travel throughout some very productive farm ground in the state of Oregon, western valley, and not that we're totally opposed to it. I think there's a proper place and location for that, and it's in central Oregon or eastern Oregon where it doesn't take away from high-valued property. And there's many objections. Everybody has their own personal objection to it, I'm sure, but there's one thing that we're all in unity with, and that is the fact that it's threatening exclusive farm use ground. And this is our big concern, and we would hope that you will all be on our side in opposition to this and go forward with a strong argument against the state proposing this. And so I got to be the lucky one today. Everybody else was tied up, and so you had to listen to my spew. But anyway, I would pass out cry towels if it were acceptable, and I just hope that you really consider the fact that the destruction of exclusive farm ground, and it's been zoned that way for 50 years, and all of a sudden they want to change the rules. And so that's basically all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you strongly consider the fact that this is not the place to have this. So thank you.
Arnie, thank you. And I'm new as chair, so forgive me if can we ask questions or okay. All right. I do have a question. So when you said it sounds like investors, Korean and California, that had purchased the property, and we heard testimony yesterday on 1,500.
1,588 acres is the proposed acreage of this.
1,588 acres of all solar array?
Yes, and it's the complex or compound, whichever one you referred to it, is going to be enclosed by a 6-foot tall chain link fence, which would have a huge effect on the migration and habitat of bird, waterfowl, streams involved, the habitat in streams, migration of elk that go through that country on a general basis. The sound pollution, the fire risk with the Harrisburg Fire Department overloading that system. There's just a lot of concerns, many concerns, and it's just not a suitable place to have this happen.
And just as a follow-up, so those investors purchased the land, and is it more than 1,580 that they purchased, or is it?
They've purchased some of the land. Some of it is owned privately by farmers that have contracted out for a 40-year lease.
Oh, okay.
And the proposed termination of that would be 40 years, and we all know that they could never return the value back into that farm ground once this has existed there. Okay. They drive steel piling into the ground, concrete forms. They have battery storage facilities with huge concrete pads that support that. It's just an industrial complex is what it is.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions of Arnie? Arnie, appreciate you coming.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I'll get kind of zinged if I do something wrong from Carla back there, so thank you, Carla. All right, so next we'll just move into our board business. And the first area for board business is the ODA program area reports. And I'll just say this, I am always actually overwhelmed, but impressed with the breadth, depth, thoughtfulness that go into these reports, and for folks that are, members of or employees of ODA that help put these together, it's definitely not going unnoticed from a board standpoint, but because they're also so thorough, a lot of times we may not have that many follow-up questions. But I will open it up, though, to the board to see if there are any questions, comments on the ODA program area reports. And I don't know if Deputy Director Henderson, you had anything you wanted to emphasize or add in that. If there were, then we could have you add some additional comments. So, but I'll open it up to the board. And that's under tab 11. We heard a little bit about the state meat inspection grant that had been approved, and maybe we could just hear a little bit more about that. So 9 million by the legislature this year will go through a similar process. Are there any new approaches we're going to be making in that $9 million distribution?
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the board, Lauren Henderson, Deputy Director. For the most part, there are some tweaks we've made in that program, but for the most part, it's more of the same. I think if you remember the first time we did this with the 2 million, we talked about the 40 plus applicants that we had, which told me there's definitely an interest out there. And so we awarded those first 6. We've upped the limit that someone can get to 750,000. I will just tell you that's pretty easy to get a grant that is that much with a match. So we're looking forward to getting those out and probably have a little more information the next 2 board meetings about the kinds of projects that we saw. I've already talked to some future applicants that are ready to go and waiting for us to get this out. It's never fast enough. I will just say when we look at them and evaluate them and the processes that we're going through with that, still on my mind is trying to close those processing gaps, those deserts I talk about in our state. My hope is that this grant opportunity is the next stepping stone for us to continue that work. We are challenged internally to keep up staffing wise and building a state meat program internally. I'm challenged with not asking the legislature for a lot of staff that don't have a lot of work to do today, but also that means that we're behind already. As these grants come on and you get more technical assistance, we're at that point right now where we really need to start adding more staff. The state doesn't have a class and classification of employee that fits this very well. So we're going to have to put a square peg in a round hole till we create that inspector position or what that looks like. You've heard me talk about the general inspector positions. So I guess what I'm telling you is we have a lot of work to do internally to figure out how to keep up with a very exciting program. To me, I knew that going into this, but that's where we're at today and hoping we get a lot of good requests and interest. There's definitely interest out there.
So just to follow on with that comment, so the FTE need, you said state inspector, but also just the infrastructure needed to administer grants. In my old hat on at EPA, we had a whole group of people that just did grants, and it was a big deal because it had to be audited and lots of things. So which way, or maybe it's an and?
It's an and. We don't have that group. We have lots of really good people internal to ODA. You met a couple of them yesterday. And so in order to build initiatives in this state and move things forward like the state meat initiative that I believe has a lot of win-win in a lot of places for people. It's going to take some internal work in our agency to build the capacity to be able to do that. It's actually the simple part is actually receiving the money from the authority and then building the grant process. The work comes in evaluating the projects, making sure that they're successful, having technical assistance out to help people get good grants. And that's where a lot of the work is. And then in the end of all of that, somebody wants to know, did the money actually go to what its intended purpose and what were the outcomes? We don't have a good structure for any of that right now, I would say. We do really well with what we have, but it does limit our ability to do more. And I think we're missing out on some opportunities.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the report from board members? We do have one other, but since Director Boyer's not here. Anyway, I did want to ask about the canola report that went in. And so if Jonathan, you might want to, my thought would just give a thumbnail to the board of what was submitted to the legislature and next steps. And I know that a copy of the report is going to be going out to the board, but if you could provide that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Certainly. Chair Miller, Acting Director Ryan, members of the Board of Ag, Jonathan Sandow, Department of Ag. So I would say the report's on OLS underneath the September legislature, so it is a public document. It's out there. We will certainly circulate a copy with the board members, and so we have it readily available for folks. So again, backing up to last session, legislature asked us to do a report for legislative recommendations for a longer term plan. We held 3 work groups with stakeholders to try to develop that report and those recommendations, and then ultimately submitted it for September Ledge Days, gave a presentation then, and then a subsequent presentation last week to the Senate Committee for Natural Resources. And so I'll go through the next step process and then kind of detail it out. But the next steps are the House Ag Committee has a committee bill ready for them to work on the actual policy language and move it forward. And so it will be introduced in the short session, deliberated, go through the public process there, and move on. So the elements of kind of ODA's report was really working through making sure that we have clear term definitions in statute. So where it's very understood what everyone's talking about in terms of defining what the Willamette Valley Protection District is, anchoring into what brassica seed productions and what the species that are included underneath that, and then also establishing kind of the rules of operation of inside of the Willamette Valley Protection District. So this is not a statewide policy implementation. It's really narrowed to the Willamette Valley Protection District, and looking at then what are the needs of the producers within that geographical space, and coming up with isolation distances from each other, isolation variances, right? Very key, important information there. And then also layering into it, there was conversations around, should it be an ODA pinning map? So everyone has to come to us, pin, those types of things. Or are we able to just offer a pinning map for producers to participate in for communication records compliance, right? It's a more of a setting folks up for success element there. And so really just trying to determine the rules of the road. So the report, we detailed out in the report that we should have a 3-mile isolation distance between the brassica seed producers within that district. Folks have to follow all of our pest and disease, standards and ordinances, and that producers of GE varieties of brassicas would have a 4-mile isolation distance. That was discussed in the work group, and then also the pinning requirement, or at least the record keeping of that, and then more of a favoring of us providing a map that folks can use to have that level of communication as part of it. And so, and within that as well, likely like an ODA registration to be able to be a brassica seed producer. That way there's, we have an awareness of folks. There's a bit of a connection there between the statute and us and the producers. And so really trying to look at how to get there from where we are right now, which is, the 500 acre limits on canola production in the Willamette Valley to, looking at more of a holistic system. So obviously there's more detail to play out within the policy construction of that bill. There's a lot more public engagement that will be brought into it. But that's where the report sits. And then the next steps is the development of the policy bill through the House Ag Committee, and then obviously the introduction during session where there's plenty of time, well, 6 weeks, but where there's the short session opportunity to engage in the public process.
So it's anticipated that the legislative language will be developed and introduced then in the short session, or we don't know that yet. It's now in the legislature's hands, is basically, because I was thinking from an ODA responsibility, we can provide input, comments, answer questions, that sort of thing, but it's out of ODA's hands at this stage.
Correct. I mean, we will, as we do with, a lot of policy discussions, we're here to help the legislatures, answer questions, navigate, think through, those types of solutions. But that's correct. So legislative deadline was last week for members to introduce both personal bills and committee bills to their internal process, right? And so those bills are starting to get drafted based on the language that members provided their ledge council. And then we'll see the language will be officially introduced.
So we don't really know the language submitted. It would be placeholder mainly, or is it going to be more in depth, do we think?
As of right now, I think it's a placeholder language. And that gives us more time between now and, January-ish to be able to have engaged conversations, us, the legislators, right? Everyone involved who needs those.
Well, thank you. And is this the first time that ODA has been specifically asked by the legislature to give recommendations by this turnaround date? I mean, it was fast.
It was fast. I don't know if it's not an uncommon place to be to write reports, to give the recommendations in 3 months. Maybe that's a little bit uncommon, but it's not an uncommon thing to ask of agencies or that level of engagement.
Chair Miller, members of the board, no, it's not. We've been asked to do this before, different subjects. However, I would say this is the first time that I thought that everyone understood that the hurdle they gave us was big and the expectation was large. And so I think there was a lot of support knowing that we could only do so much work in a certain amount of time. So I think top to bottom, everybody knew that was going to be difficult to do. But in order to move this conversation along and not have it continue to be where it is, which I think no one wants it to continue what's been happening, I think we were at where we did. And kudos to Jonathan and Sunny and frankly, everybody that sat around the table. The meetings were good, very good discussions. And I thought were productive, as only you can be when people all have different interests and are trying to really tackle a very complicated subject that I've been dealing with ever since I've been with ODA.
Yeah, and I'll add, and I put this on the legislative record, other folks put it on the record as well. It was for the topic and the time, probably an extremely productive work group, and with everyone focused on the task on hand. And it was a good conversations, continue to be good conversations. So.
Yeah, and I did participate, having not too much knowledge about canola until I stepped into the meetings, but I want to commend ODA. You guys did a very, very good job. Lots of disparate opinions, and some folks who maybe came in at the 11th hour with more disparate opinions, which is unfortunate, but it's the way sometimes things happen. But I think it was productive dialogue because of how you handled it. So we'll see what's next. But that's the end of my questions. But if anybody else has questions on the programmatic reports, or if Deputy Director Henderson, you want to add anything, but go ahead, Director Owen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Miller. Eric Orm. I just maybe have one question, and maybe for Jim Johnson. You know, we've heard twice now, or both days of the meetings about, you know, the concern of EFU with these solar projects on Class 1 soils and on this project. And I guess my question is, you know, as a farmer, we feel like we have protection with the EFU. And if there is a way at the state level or at the county level to sidestep the EFU for these projects, do we really have EFU protection? And I agree with the gentleman today that it sets a precedent if they sidestep in some of the most productive ground in Oregon, to just bring on more projects. So it's my question.
Good question. Thank you.
Jim Johnson. It's a complicated question, but it's also kind of straightforward. Number one, the exclusive farm use zone in and of itself is not an exclusive farm use zone. There's like 50 non-farm uses that may be allowed in the zone, and that's a real issue in and of itself that LCDC is actually tackling right now because of the concerns that of, you know, the cumulative impact, for example, of non-farm development. Energy facility siting is a whole nother ballgame because there's another set of laws that parallel the land use laws that come into play that are incorporated by the Energy Facility Siting Council. And in the specific situation, there is state statute separate from land use statute that the Department of Energy deals with that actually establishes a different set of standards for approving energy facility sites on high value farmland. And so in the subject case, in my opinion, the land ownership was gerrymandered to ensure that it was high value farmland. You know, you'd think you'd want to go the other way. It would be easier to site on non-high value farmland. But in the case of energy facility siting statutes that are not land use statutes, if you're high value farmland under statute, and this goes back many, many, many years, if you're high value farmland, you actually, two things happen. You don't have to go to the local government. It's actually then sent to the Energy Facility Siting Council to apply the land use standards. And number two, there's a different set of standards for taking what's called an exception. Generally, if you take an exception to the statewide planning program to approve a use, you've got to show a need or a reason to be there. And you also have to show that there are not alternative locations that could meet that need that don't involve farm or forest land. In front of the Energy Facility Siting Council, that alternatives analysis isn't required. So all they've got to do is basically show a need to be out there. So, you know, there's a transmission line, there's a substation or whatever, so it's locationally dependent. But they don't have to show that there are other locations that could meet that same need that don't involve farmland. And in my opinion, and just my opinion, that's in some ways very contrary to the statewide planning program to have that exception when, say, if somebody wanted to put another industrial use out there, they would have to go through that process and show there are not alternatives, and they would go to the local government first. So that's, you know, that's a policy issue, and that's what I've been talking to the people out here in the area where this is being proposed, is that there's the specific case that's being reviewed now, and they'll have to, you know, apply a lot of criteria that still may be problematic, but not necessarily related to protecting farmland. And then there's the policy question, which is the fact that they have this different process that they can go through that other people don't have the opportunity to do.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Director Orm. That was a very thoughtful question and appreciate the response. So Okay.
If I could, Chair Miller, members, Lauren Henderson, just a couple of things. I wanted to point out on page 3, under the commodity inspection, that first bullet there, it's buried in here, our partnership with the Department of Education, Oregon FFA, and Ontario High School in a pilot program, and the 15 students that are there. That's really a very innovative program, but more importantly, it's a partnership with really 4 different entities that you might not think could collaborate in this way. It's our ongoing effort as an agency to bring our young people and our younger generation into agriculture. You will, I hope, get to hear more about that. I'm pretty excited about that there. And then the other thing I wanted to say is you can see when you read these reports, our program directors and their staff and managers are stretched pretty thin. They're doing a lot of different things. I literally, and Acting Director Ryan has probably seen this, you literally can touch 9 different subjects in before noon in our agency, which is very exciting from my point of view, but can be very tasking. And we're talking a lot about how we prioritize our work and still get everything done. And so I hope you, whenever you have time to read these word for word, which I know you all do, there's a lot of work that goes into this behind the scenes to actually get this here. And so kudos to those program directors and their staff. But secondly, I wanted to mention this document and some others are going into a transition document for our new director, so that our new director on 12/1 can hit the ground running with all of the things that are going on in our agency. In that first 90 days, it's going to take a bit, I think, with everything to get up to speed. And so there will be ongoing discussions about the big issues in our agency. We've talked about a couple of them here, that core capacity that our agency has and how we do that internally and continue to keep our customer service at the level that it needs to be. But I wanted to just mention to you that is happening. And so when our director comes to the agency on 12/1, which is a Friday, not too far away, and then I just wanted to publicly mention big thanks to Acting Director Ryan for coming in and helping us. You know, it's a compliment, I think, to the natural resource agencies that our staff, I knew they would, opened their arms up and welcome Bill just like I thought they would. And we really haven't missed a beat, and I'm so proud of that. And it's a true testament to the character that we have not only at our agency. I haven't heard much from DSL because they haven't called me and yelled at me, but thank them a lot for that. And Bill and I will spend some time with our new director on 12/1, just talking the 3 of us and going from there. And then I wanted to mention Mr. Sandow is headed overseas on a very exciting trade mission soon, Singapore and Taiwan. So I'm sure when they get back, we'll have some information around that trade mission.
Excellent. And Deputy Director Henderson, thank you. Obviously, we'll have other chances to say thanks for a lot of things, but it's been pretty seamless with everything that's been going on. And thank you for noting the FFA. Given my other hat, which the board meeting I'll be attending the next 2 days in Salem, if there are other opportunities from an ODA standpoint to look at this certification and training, and obviously it's an area where we're lacking staff, and it's a great opportunity for FFA and local ag teachers to look at advancing career tech education. That would be great. And I'll say one other thing. Over time, and when you came, Deputy Director, to speak to the Oregon FFA convention, I don't think I've said this publicly in this meeting, it was a wow factor. He came to our state conference last March, and he just set the stage on fire. It was very, very cool, and it was a very great testimony to the support of agriculture and also just raising the bar for ODA. So thank you for that. And to the extent that other states And we in Oregon are going to be talking about increasing our relationship at a national level. FFA is increasing its relationship with the Department of Ag. Secretary Vilsack has been very, very helpful and very supportive in all that. So it's setting some precedents for some activities that, from an Oregon standpoint, given who our CEO is a former director of Ag here for FFA, he will be pursuing other opportunities. And so I wanted to mention that to the board too. Nothing's been decided, and you guys need to have further discussions. But I personally love to see a stronger relationship with FFA and the Department of Ag, because it's just it just makes a lot of sense. So good, thank you, great. Anything else on the reports? All right. So work group selection for 2024. Carla, do you want folks to declare now, or do you want them to send you emails? And I know it's hard, I think, for the department if all of us say we want to be on one work group but not another. So I know for one, I may have a preference, but where you need to put me is going to be okay. But how do you want to handle that for the work group A and B?
I think since we're missing a couple of members here this morning, that I think I'll just send out an email and ask you to let me know your preference. And as Elin said, if we have an overwhelming interest on one work group or another, then we'll get back to you and see about switching work groups. We cannot have more than 5 members on each work group. And so that's the reason for making that selection. So I'd like to know your preference, and then we'll get back with you on what our work groups will look like for 2024.
Great. So be expecting an email from Carla on what your selections might be. Next is we've kind of given preludes to this, to the 2024 meeting dates and locations. And this is always like a difficult deal, but maybe it'll be easy this time. But we want to make sure that we are as accommodating as we possibly can to everybody, so we can have full, really attendance at all these meetings, and to the extent that, as we heard earlier, in person. And so I'll just mention that. Let me make sure I get there we go. So the dates that had been proposed, and my thought is let's get dates down, and then we can talk about locations. Okay? So, and even though maybe some of those locations take some of us a day to drive to get there, but unless somebody wants to fly us, but anyway, but so January through March, there are some suggestions of January 16th through the 18th, February 13th through the 15th, and March 12th through the 14th. I heard from Director Boyer that she would be unavailable February 13th through the 15th, March 12th through the 14th. I am unavailable January 16th. Well, no, I am unavailable in person January 16th through the 18th through February 13th through the 15th. I am willing to chair if the board says it's okay virtually. I will be in the lower latitudes of the world at that stage, warm, but happy to. Any of those dates would actually work for me. The first 2 virtual, and the last one I can do in person. But I wanted to note that Director Boyer said the 16th through the 18th was a problem. So I don't know if Dean Simonich, you had any preferences since you're virtual, and then I'll kind of open it up here for the rest of the group, because I'd love to have us nail this down now if we can. That would be great.
Can you tell me the dates again?
Yeah, so January 16 through 18, February 13 through 15, March 12 through 14. And while you're looking, Dean Simonich, is there anybody who absolutely can't do any of those 3 dates?
Chair Miller, I will be unavailable February 13th through the 15th, but I can do the other 2 sessions.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, Brian Harper here. I'm planning on going on a cruise in January, and I'm double checking on the date. So it's right close to that 19th, 20th. So it could work January, which sounds like so far that's looking better.
Better than not.
Yeah.
So far. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll confirm that here in a bit.
Okay.
January is better for me.
Okay. So, and maybe the location could be right where you need to get on a plane to then head to, anyway. Okay. So January 16 and 18, and I would be virtual, but I've, chatted with Carla and I've chaired lots of virtual meetings, but folks can kind of send me pings if I'm messing up and not recognizing somebody that I should be if I'm doing that virtually. But so January 16th through 18th?
Is that one always in Salem?
Yes.
It normally is in Salem. It is pre-session. I think we should talk location before that, but it probably will be. Yeah.
I just wanted to offer if it is in Salem, and we need a tour, we can come out to the nursery.
Darn, I'll miss. Okay.
Chair Miller, I was actually going to ask, can we, so because we have session in that cycle, would it be able to push some of these dates around? So a good example would be that Oregon legislative session is open from February the 5th through the March the 10th. And the closest time we have to that is March 12th through the 14th. Could we push that up by a week and have it the week before to visit legislators again, as we did this past year, if that is helpful or warranted?
I don't know if we need in a short session necessarily for that as a priority, but I leave it to the team to.
Board members, I would say.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I don't remember having the board do much in a short session, but because it is a short session, they try to do a lot in a little bit of time, and I'm not sure the visits would maybe get where you wanted them to be. Not saying we can't obviously call up some people and have some visits, but I wouldn't count on that. I'll just say it that way. There's just so much going on in February. Okay.
So we might, but I think we need to focus for the following year for that involvement. So going once, twice, January 16th through 18th. Sold. All right. April through June. The proposed dates are April 9th through 11th, May 7th through 9th, and June 4th through 6th. And Barbara, again, because she also serves on a lot of other boards, she cannot do April 9th through 11th or May 7th through 9th, but can do June 4th through 6th. So Dean Simonich, I don't know what June 4th through 6th might look like, but again, the other dates were April 9th through 11th, May 7th through 9th.
Let me check. Go to someone else first.
Yeah, we'll let you double check. And so does anybody have any conflicts on the June 4th through 6th time frame?
That would make 2 for 2 out of my preferred dates.
Ah, pretty good. Yeah, this is good. This is good. Well, let me just say, if we do that, the week before, you'll all be in Umpqua and helping me prepare for the garden tour, no pressure, for the county that'll be at my house. So anyway, okay. All right. So Dean Simmons, why don't you keep looking at it? The preferred is June 4th through 6th.
That'll work.
Excellent. We got a date. All right. The next 3 dates, July through September 2024, are July 16th through 18th, which was preferred by Barbara Boyer, Director Boyer, as really the only date. But, anyway, August 13th through 15th and September 10th through 12th were the 3 dates. So July 16th through 18th, August 13th through 15th, September 10th through 12th. So any specific conflicts on those three? And Director Boyer gave me these just because she was leaving, so we don't have to absolutely, if she can't, she can't. But if we can all make it, that makes it even.
Chair Miller.
Yes.
So July 16th through the 18th is like right in the middle of wheat harvest. Not that it couldn't be done if we were to do an Eastern Oregon location. That would be interesting because you could come out to the wheat field and do some tour of, and maybe a tour of the Port of Morrow at the same time, drive some combine. But August 13th through the 15th has been a date the last couple of years. It's right in the middle of our fair, and I can usually attend the first evening and day, but then on the Thursday, I would not be able to attend.
Okay.
Because of Morrow County Fair.
Okay. So you're saying, but it is harvest, so good or bad? Because we also are back to back. We're like within 5 weeks of
I was
having
going to
2
say
board meetings.
I would prefer September because it's farther from
Okay.
June.
So let's.
My preferred date would be September if we could. I just,
Okay.
the offer would be there if it
Thank
went
you.
July. So.
Thank you.
And Chair Miller, September for me is the harvest cycle, but for me, it's not a problem at all. I could step away I might have to do what Director Orem does, show up for a few days and then take off.
Okay. All right.
I'm
So
not opposed to that either.
September 10th through 12th.
Which is right in the middle of Pendleton Roundup. So I may not be able to make that
I think
one.
it's the next week.
Oh, it is for 2024?
I would have
Okay.
to look. It's usually the third full week of September. So
I guess I see online September 10 through 11, 2024, or 11, 12.
it might be. We should look.
Yeah. Why don't you look that up?
No to Pendleton.
Maybe we need to have our meetings in Pendleton.
Well,
don't
actually,
wanna-
Pendleton might. No, that would be
You
very.
don't want a hotel room in Pendleton during that time.
Yeah, very difficult. But given the board, given ODA, you can find us a place. I'm sorry.
Well, the price.
We're good. I don't know how good we are, but the board did meet during Roundup. Has done.
Oh.
That was the first year that I started.
Was that the first year? In fact, the
And we were thinking Pendleton.
board spent an evening at the PBR bull riding event
That was great.
for fun.
Well,
So we
I
have
will
done
be there,
before.
so it make it good for me.
So
Well, September 10th through, what does it say on the website?
It does say that. So if you're September 11th through the 14th which is interesting, but yeah.
Okay. All right. We'd obviously have to jump on that immediately, but that work for everybody? Yeah. Yeah. But in order to be able to attend the meetings and stuff like that. Yeah. So, okay. Let's do that one. All right. So September 10th through 12th, and that is decided Pendleton. Good. And then we're looking at for October through December, October 8th through 10th, November 5 through 7, which was Director Boyer's preference, and then December 10th through 12th. And as I look at mine, I think.
One vote for December.
Okay, so December 10th through 12th. That's tough for me, but it's possible.
Chair Miller, I know the November date, as I know it, was a conflict for Director Hansen.
Oh, was it? Okay. Okay. How crazy would it be to have it that following week in December? I know it's getting close to the holidays, but looking at the 17th through the 19th for folks. Normally, there's not many conflicts during that time.
November won't work for me, but the 2 December periods would.
Okay, so December 17th through 19th would work for you?
Yeah, either that or the 10th
The
or
10th
12th.
or the 12th, okay. 10th through the 12th would be really hard for me, but if we had to, but is 17th through 19th? Any objections, any issues there? Okay, all right. Let's do, and actually Barbara said that following week would work for her too, if we were in conflict, so, okay.
The one thing, this is Carla, the one thing I would mention is that we have had an invitation from DEQ, the Environmental Quality Commission, wanting to have a joint meeting. We have had a meeting with them in September of, 19. Anyway, it's been a while since we've had a joint meeting with them, but they are selecting their dates here at their next meeting, which I think is early December. So if we want to, I will certainly share our dates that we've selected and see if they can work around our dates. But when we get a report back of what their dates and locations are, we'll see if we can combo up and adjust as necessary.
Okay, and, but we will give them our dates that we have selected as a preference, though.
Yes.
Correct, okay. All right, so we'll keep January 16th through 18th, June 4th through 6th, September 10th through 12th, December 17th through 19th as our dates, and then we'll be asking EQC, if that can work. And very honestly, maybe what we need to do, if that makes it difficult, that maybe we need to actually already plot 2024 with them and just both of us lock a date, and maybe 2025 rather, and lock a date. If none of those work and it can't seem to work out for us, then maybe we could plan way in advance and get something on the calendar. Unless there's some timing that really we want that to happen in 2024.
Actually, we had intended for this meeting to be our joint meeting, but they had some changes and conflicts, and they rearranged their meeting this quarter. So it's an open invitation, I think, of when we can make it work. But so we'll see if these dates will work for 24, and that if not, look out to 25.
Yeah, I think it could take us a bit to get that coordinated, as you can imagine. So I think we just want to keep it on the radar. I think there's actually some other opportunities, maybe as we look at the calendar for this board to interact at some level with a couple other
boards.
The OWEB board, we've done that before, I think would be interesting. So we can look at this calendar along with theirs and see if there's some common places across that. But yeah, I think we.
Okay. That sounds great. And then what will be best other than Pendleton for location, for suggestions? Should we just leave that up to you all to figure out for us? I know I think there's interest in going to Southeast Oregon since we haven't been in a very, very long time. So that's I think something that might be important. And we are going to hit the northeast with Pendleton. So that's helpful. And is there another area of the state we need to think about we haven't been, well, if we're in southeast Oregon, at least we're south. But any other thoughts there on locations? And then is that something that maybe you guys can get together and come back and just let us know?
Yeah, Chair Miller and the board, if we could have geographic ideas, then we can, as a team, go back and maybe make some suggestions and bring those back. But it would be helpful to have a compass a little bit.
Okay.
Knowing that Pendleton is going to be dependent on what we can find there and whether that fits in or not. If it can't, we may have to have a plan B there as well. But I would guess we would try to stick within that
area. Yeah. Yes, Director Lopez.
Thank you, Chair Miller. My goodness, sorry.
Deputy.
Deputy, thank you. Miller, Lauren, oh, goodness. What about fisheries? We haven't visited fisheries or talked about fisheries.
Good point. That would be another. So if we threw out to you directionally, potentially, my assumption is the January 16th through 18th would be in Salem then? Okay. Or area. Okay.
Yeah, we had talked about maybe having the board meeting at the new lab complex.
Yes.
But I don't know. We'll be moving another lab around that particular time, but maybe that would be okay.
Interesting.
Interesting for sure. But.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good one for either January or December. It's easier to travel into that
Yes.
area.
Actually, just, yeah, that's a good point. That's
Generally, last year it snowed.
yeah. So, so then directionally, if we could have something that could be from fishery seafood focus as well as southeast. That would be great. Yeah. But I think leave it up to you guys just for logistics, because you've got to figure out hotel and location and all that. I'm fine to leave logistics up to you guys, but if other comments, Jonathan?
Just looking at weather considerations, Southeast Oregon might make more sense into that June slot, so we don't get hit with any wet. But those are just just broad considerations thinking through.
Oh, that's good.
Coast and seafood in December, this will be just as fun, I'm sure. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we have had board meetings where we met in the evening and woke up in the morning to 2.5, 3 feet of snow. I can remember the snow was over the bumper of my Suburban, so that was a lot of fun. But we had a great board meeting.
At least everybody was there already, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
I think the last couple of meetings, if you look on the list for locations, we have been in Astoria and Coos Bay, but we probably haven't been like the central coast, like Newport, Lincoln City, that central area for a while.
Or have we been to South Coast at all? Now I don't know where the fishery, well, okay, I'm looking at Brookings. Yeah.
Not that far.
Okay, well, we'll leave that up unless there are any other comments. Okay, good, great. Okay, next, let me make sure I know where I am. Okay, so we basically, that is usually a very lengthy issue to go through, so thank you. Topics for newsletter. And then we did have, suggestion that we look at some even topics for board meetings too, for what we want to have folks come in and do, which we go off the recommendations of the team at ODA. But at the same time, if there's some real desires to have some things happen. And we did have some discussions on ag overtime. And I don't know what extent we could leave that with the team and when. And then I also wrote down, there was one other subject that we had talked about. I'll have to look for that. But anyway, newsletter, which we actually haven't had our newsletter, right?
No, you haven't. So we're working on plans to maybe do a year in review or a few months in review for the board. Also an update on our status report for our industry report. I do have a draft ready to circulate internally. And so we'll get those finalized here before the end of the year.
Well, so we will have as a goal, because we have not done a newsletter the entire year.
Correct.
And so I would say let's just make sure we absolutely get something out before the end.
Absolutely.
Of the year. Okay. Which may be a year in review. So, okay. But any other subjects, any other ideas?
When we
Dr.
were
Zawinski.
talking about the different work group things, a couple of ideas came up. One, I do recall getting a presentation from the Fish and Wildlife about the cougar management, but it would be cool to hear the wolf management.
Wolf management,
person.
yeah, okay.
And then Eric had the idea, like, if that could happen while we were in Pendleton, that would be even better. Like, let's hear everybody. Let's have it where it matters the most. And it'd be really cool if it was like right after the rodeo, like the first night of the rodeo. 'Cause it's like enraged and tired. I don't know. It could be funny. Anyway, the other one that I kind of wanted was if one of these has to do with the Oregon agricultural easement deal. We had a presentation on that last time we talked about this, but it was all very like the funding and everything was just coming together. And so I was hoping maybe we could see some specific projects that have received, have done the whole easement process now, or are very far along in that process. Because I had a real hard time understanding what it even was, but with concrete examples, it would be a lot more interesting, I think.
Wrapping in the Ag Heritage Commission, is that what you're thinking? Wrapping in the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission and the work that they.
Yeah, or I think Jim has some involvement on it, and we were talking about some examples in the room over there, and it started to make a lot more sense than it did. Yeah.
Yeah, and also Jim in our subgroup, and that's what I wrote down and I can't find, that you had mentioned, wouldn't it be good for the board to have a overall 101 and ag land use 101 related to farming or ag use 101 period. I can't remember which one, but it's such a complicated subject and we haven't really had the comprehensive review. So that might be great to have that on one of our agendas going forward. So, okay. Anything else? All right. Well, we are basically at our conclusion a little later, but at least we got through everything. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Director Harper, second Director Lopez. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.